A slave man wakes to find the master's wife sleeping beside him. Then this happened. In the quiet of dawn, an unexpected awakening leads to a moment that could alter their fates forever. This forbidden encounter ignites a spark of desire and fear, setting the stage for a story filled with perilous choices. As their lives intertwine in ways they never imagined, the stakes rise and the question looms: how far will they go to protect their love in a world that seeks to tear them apart? As dawn breaks over the sprawling plantation, the air hangs heavy with anticipation. The first rays of sunlight filter through the worn wooden slats of the cabin, casting soft shadows on the dirt floor. Inside, a slave stirs from his restless sleep, his heart beating in rhythm with the quiet rustle of the morning breeze. The scent of earth and dew fills the room, mingling with the faint aroma of the breakfast that will soon be prepared. But today is different. Today, his life is about to change forever. He opens his eyes and blinks into the golden light, only to find the master's wife lying beside him, her delicate features softened in slumber. For a moment, he is frozen, caught between disbelief and a rush of emotions he cannot name. Panic grips his chest. How did they end up here? The memories of the previous night flood back. The laughter, the stolen glances across the crowded room, and the intoxicating thrill of their secret conversations. It had all felt so innocent then. Yet now the reality of their situation crashes down on him like a tidal wave. Every heartbeat echoes the danger of this moment, and he feels the tension rising within him. What could this mean for them? The weight of their circumstances hangs heavily in the air. He knows the risks they both face. If discovered, the consequences would be dire, not only for him, but for her as well. He glances at her, his heart aching with a mix of longing and fear. She is beautiful, with hair cascading like dark silk over her shoulders and lips that seem to curl into a soft smile even in sleep. In that charged silence, their eyes meet, and an unspoken connection ignites, a spark of longing that defies the chains of their existence. The world outside, with its harsh realities and unyielding rules, feels miles away in that moment. He can see it reflected in her eyes, a blend of vulnerability and strength, a recognition of the bond they share, even in the midst of their perilous situation. But this is just the beginning. As the sun climbs higher, illuminating the cabin, the outside world will soon intrude upon their fragile sanctuary. The sounds of the plantation waking up, shouts of overseers, the distant clatter of horses, and the rustling of the workers beginning their day, serve as a stark reminder of the life they cannot escape. The consequences of their forbidden bond will soon unravel, and with each passing moment, the stakes grow higher. The sun hung high in the sky, casting a warm glow over the plantation as the day unfolded. The cabin, once a sanctuary of whispered dreams and secret glances, felt more like a prison with every passing minute. The sounds of laborers hard at work outside punctuated the stillness, reminding him of the unyielding reality they faced. As he lay there, heart racing, he knew he had a choice to make, a choice that would determine not just their fates but the very essence of their lives. With a deep breath, he turned to face her, his mind racing with possibilities. Would they continue this secret dance, or would they risk everything for a chance at something more? The thought of being discovered sent a chill down his spine, but the idea of living without her was unbearable. He glanced at her, taking in the soft rise and fall of her chest, the way the sunlight kissed her skin, making her glow. In that moment, he realized that this was not just a fleeting romance. It was a connection that transcended the walls that bound them. He felt an urgency to voice his feelings, to lay bare the turmoil within him. As he gathered his thoughts, she stirred, her eyes fluttering open, and for a moment, the world outside faded away. "What time is it?" she murmured, her voice thick with sleep and confusion. He could see the remnants of dreams still clinging to her as she searched for clarity in his gaze. "It's still early," he replied, trying to keep his voice steady despite the turmoil within. But we need to talk." As she propped herself up on one elbow, the soft light illuminated her features, revealing a mixture of curiosity and apprehension. "About what?" "About us," he said, his heart pounding in his chest. "About what happened last night and what it means for our future." Her expression shifted as understanding dawned, and he could see the flicker of fear in her eyes. "You know we can't," she began, but he interrupted her with a sense of urgency. "I know the risks, but I can't pretend that this doesn't matter. You mean something to me, something more than just this life we're forced to endure." She inhaled sharply, her gaze darting away as if she could somehow escape the weight of his words. "But if we're caught, it could mean everything. For both of us." He reached out, taking her hand in his, feeling the warmth of her skin against his. "I'd rather fight for a chance at happiness than live my life in fear. We can't let this moment slip away, not when it feels so real." For a long moment, silence enveloped them, filled only by the distant sounds of the plantation coming to life, the clanging of metal, the calls of overseers, and the rustling of grass underfoot all served as reminders of the world that awaited them beyond these walls. Then she squeezed his hand, and he felt a spark of determination ignite between them. "You're right. We can't ignore what we feel. But what do we do now?" He sat up, the weight of the decision pressing heavily on his shoulders. "We need a plan. We can't stay here forever. Maybe we can find a way to escape, to start anew somewhere far from here." Her brow furrowed in thought, and he could see the wheels turning in her mind. "And if we fail? If we're caught?" "Then we fight," he replied, his voice steady with conviction. "We fight for our freedom, for our love, and for the life we deserve. I won't let fear dictate our choices." A slow smile spread across her face, and he felt a rush of relief and hope. "Then let's do it. Let's find a way to make this work." As they shared a moment of connection, the gravity of their decision settled in. They were no longer just two souls trapped in a desperate situation. They were partners in a quest for freedom. Together, they would navigate the treacherous path ahead, facing whatever challenges lay in their way. But the reality of their situation was harsh. The plantation was a sprawling expanse, filled with watchful eyes and harsh overseers. Every corner echoed with the stories of those who had tried and failed to escape. They would need to be cunning, to plan meticulously, and to tread carefully. "Tonight, when the moon is high, we can meet in the clearing by the old oak tree," he suggested, a plan forming in his mind. "It's hidden from view, and we can speak freely there." She nodded, her expression serious. "We'll need to gather supplies. Food, water, anything we can carry. We don't know how far we'll have to go." "Agreed," he said, feeling a surge of determination. "We'll make a list, and tonight we start our journey." As the day wore on, they exchanged furtive glances and secret smiles, their hearts racing with the thrill of what lay ahead. They were bound by more than just circumstance. They were united in a shared dream of freedom and love. The sun began to set, casting a warm orange hue across the sky, and with it came the realization that their time was running short. Tonight would be the first step toward a life they had only dared to dream of, and as the shadows lengthened, they steeled themselves for the challenges that awaited them. Together, they would face this uncertain future, ready to embrace whatever came next. The sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of purple and gold as the last remnants of daylight faded into dusk. The plantation was alive with the sounds of evening, the rustle of leaves, the distant calls of crickets, and the occasional murmur of workers finishing their long day. Inside the cabin, the air felt thick with anticipation as he and she prepared for their clandestine meeting beneath the old oak tree. In the dim light, they gathered their thoughts and materials, the weight of their decision pressing heavily upon them. A small cloth sack lay on the floor, waiting to be filled with the essentials for their journey. He retrieved a worn piece of parchment and a charcoal stick, his hands trembling slightly as he began to write down their plan. First, we need to gather food, he said, glancing up at her. Something that will last. Dried meat, cornmeal, maybe some fruit that we can carry easily. She nodded, her brow furrowed in concentration. We should also take water. There's a creek nearby, but we don't know how long it might take to reach it. We need enough to keep us going for several days. Agreed. We'll fill whatever we can find, maybe a few canteens or even some old jars. He paused, his heart racing at the thought. And we can take some blankets for warmth. We might have to travel at night to avoid being seen. Her eyes sparkled with a mix of fear and excitement. What about our route? We need to decide where we're going. He took a deep breath, recalling tales of escapees who had made their way north toward the promise of freedom. I've heard whispers of a place beyond the mountains, a community where people like us can be safe. It's a long way, but it's our best chance. North, she murmured, tasting the word as if it were a foreign language. It feels so far away. Far, yes, but we'll have each other. That makes it easier. We can follow the river. It will guide us and provide water along the way. The river leads to the mountains, and from there we can navigate to the Free States. A sense of purpose filled the room as they mapped out their escape. They sketched a rough outline of their path on the parchment, marking significant landmarks and potential hiding spots. Each landmark they noted felt like a beacon of hope. An old mill, a dilapidated barn, and a thicket where they could rest without fear of being seen. With each stroke of the charcoal, their dream felt more tangible, yet the reality of their situation loomed over them like a shadow. "What if we're caught?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "What if someone sees us?" He reached out, taking her hands in his, feeling the warmth of her skin against his. "We'll be careful. We'll leave when it's dark, when the overseers are less likely to be watching. We'll stick to the woods, keep our voices low, and trust our instincts." She squeezed his hands, her determination shining through her fear. "We can do this. We have to believe we can." As they finalized their plan, the weight of their decision settled in. They were no longer just two souls trapped in a desperate situation. They were partners in a quest for freedom. Together, they would navigate the treacherous path ahead, facing whatever challenges lay in their way. But the reality of their situation was harsh. The plantation was a sprawling expanse, filled with watchful eyes and harsh overseers. Every corner echoed with the stories of those who had tried and failed to escape. They would need to be cunning, to plan meticulously, and to tread carefully. Tonight, when the moon is high, we can meet in the clearing by the old oak tree, he suggested, a plan forming in his mind. It's hidden from view, and we can speak freely there. She nodded, her expression serious. We'll need to gather supplies. Food, water, anything we can carry. We don't know how far we'll have to go. Agreed, he said, feeling a surge of determination. We'll make a list, and tonight we start our journey. As they gathered their supplies, he felt a mix of excitement and dread. They moved quietly, gathering their thoughts and materials, the weight of their decision pressing heavily upon them. The cabin was dimly lit, shadows dancing along the walls as they rummaged through their meager belongings. He found a sturdy piece of cloth that could serve as a makeshift bag and a few small containers that could hold water. "This will do for now," he said, stuffing them into the sack. "We'll need to move quickly, but we can't forget the little things that will help us survive." "Are we ready?" he asked, his heart pounding in his chest as they stood by the door, ready to step into the unknown. "Almost," she replied, her voice steady despite the fear flickering in her eyes. "Just one more thing." She turned back to the small wooden table and took a simple locket from the surface. It was a gift from her mother, a reminder of home, and she clutched it tightly in her palm. "I can't leave this behind." He nodded, understanding the significance of the locket. "It will remind you of where you came from, and give you strength for where you're going." With a final glance around the cabin, they stepped outside into the cool night air. The darkness enveloped them, and the stars twinkled above like distant beacons of hope. They moved silently through the shadows, the weight of their pack resting heavily on their backs, hearts racing with each step toward freedom. As they approached the old oak tree, a sense of finality washed over them. This would be their last moment in the confines of the plantation that had held them captive for so long. They paused beneath the tree, its gnarled branches stretching out like arms ready to embrace them. "Are you ready?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. She took a deep breath, her eyes shining with determination. More than ever. With that, they clasped hands, ready to take the first step on their journey into the unknown. Together, they would face whatever challenges lay ahead, driven by love and the hope of a brighter future. As the moon rose higher in the sky, casting silvery light across the landscape, they felt a mixture of fear and exhilaration. The path ahead was uncertain, fraught with danger, yet it was also filled with the promise of a new life. They exchanged one last glance, a silent agreement forged in the depths of their hearts. "Let's go," he whispered, and with that they ventured into the dark, hand in hand, ready to embrace the trials that awaited them. The cool night air wrapped around them like a cloak as they set off into the darkness, the moonlight guiding their way. The sounds of the plantation faded behind them, replaced by the soft crunch of leaves underfoot and the distant rustle of nocturnal creatures stirring in the underbrush. Each step felt like a leap of faith, propelling them into a world filled with both peril and possibility. They moved cautiously, shadows their only companions, hearts pounding in rhythm with their footsteps. The path they chose wound through the familiar woods that bordered the plantation, where the trees stood tall and silent, guardians of their secret. He led the way, glancing back frequently to ensure she was close behind. Her presence was a steadying force, giving him strength as they ventured deeper into the night. "Stay close to the trees," he whispered, recalling the stories of those who had been caught while trying to escape. "We need to stay hidden." She nodded, her expression serious. The moon cast a silvery light across her face, illuminating the determination etched in her features. "I'm right behind you," she replied, her voice a quiet promise. As they moved further from the plantation, the air grew cooler, tinged with the scent of damp earth and pine. The familiar sounds of the plantation, the distant calls of overseers and the clanking of tools, grew faint, replaced by the serenade of crickets and the occasional hoot of an owl. Each sound felt amplified in the stillness of the night, heightening their senses and underscoring the gravity of their situation. After what felt like hours of careful navigation, they paused in a small clearing, shrouded in darkness. The trees loomed around them, their leaves rustling softly in the breeze. He turned to her, his heart racing. "Let's take a moment to rest and gather ourselves," he suggested, his voice barely above a whisper. She nodded, her breathing heavy but steady. They found a spot beneath a thick canopy of branches, where the shadows offered them a moment of respite. He set down their sack and pulled out a small piece of dried meat and a few apples, offering them to her. "Here, eat something," he urged, watching as she accepted the food with trembling hands. "We need our strength for what's ahead." As she chewed thoughtfully, he took a moment to scan their surroundings. The moonlight filtered through the leaves, casting dappled shadows on the forest floor. It was beautiful here, in stark contrast to the life they had left behind. "It's strange, isn't it?" he mused, breaking the silence. "How peaceful it is out here, away from the chaos of the plantation." She glanced up, her eyes reflecting the moonlight. "It is. I never realized how much I longed for this kind of peace," she said, her voice tinged with nostalgia. "But it's hard to enjoy it when I know we're running for our lives." "True," he replied, his brow furrowing as he thought of the dangers that still lay ahead. "But we have to keep moving. We can't let fear dictate our choices." They finished their brief meal in silence, their minds racing with thoughts of the journey ahead. After a few moments, he rose to his feet, the resolve within him reigniting. "We should keep moving. The longer we stay here, the greater the risk of being discovered." She stood as well, determination shining in her eyes. "You're right. Let's go." Together they resumed their journey, the darkness enveloping them once more. They moved with purpose, each step filled with a mix of anticipation and trepidation. The woods became their refuge, a labyrinth of shadows that shielded them from prying eyes. As they navigated through the underbrush, he recalled the stories he had heard from others about the dangers of the journey. There were tales of wild animals lurking in the woods, of treacherous paths that could lead to dead ends, and of other escapees who had been captured on the very roads they now traversed. Yet, amidst the fear, there was an undeniable thrill, a sense of freedom that coursed through their veins like wildfire. The moon hung high above, casting a gentle glow over their path. They followed the river, its soft babbling providing a comforting soundtrack to their journey. The water sparkled under the moonlight, a silver ribbon weaving through the darkness, guiding them toward their destination. "Do you hear that?" she said suddenly, her voice a mixture of excitement and apprehension. He paused, straining to listen. The sound of rushing water grew louder as they approached the river bank. "It's the river," he replied, feeling relieved. "We're on the right track." They reached the river's edge, the cool water lapping at the bank, inviting and refreshing. "Let's refill our canteens while we're here," he suggested, kneeling down to scoop water into one of the containers. As she filled her own canteen, he looked around, taking in their surroundings. The river stretched out before them, shimmering like a pathway to freedom. "Once we follow this upstream, it should lead us closer to the mountains," he said, a sense of hope swelling in his chest. With their canteens filled and spirits renewed, they set off again, the sound of the water accompanying their footsteps. As they walked, they shared stories, recounting memories of their lives before the plantation, before the constraints of their current reality. Each tale was a thread woven into the fabric of their shared journey, binding them closer together. "I used to love climbing trees," she recalled, a smile breaking through her earlier apprehension. "I would spend hours in the branches, feeling like I could touch the sky." He chuckled softly. "I can picture that. You always had a spirit that yearned for more." "And what about you?" she asked, nudging him playfully. "What was your favorite childhood memory?" He thought for a moment, a wistful smile creeping onto his face. "I remember fishing with my grandfather by the river. We'd sit for hours, talking about everything and nothing. It felt so peaceful." "Those moments must have been special," she said, her eyes reflecting the moonlight. "It's funny how those little things stay with you, even in the darkest times." As they continued along the riverbank, the tension of their escape began to ease, if only slightly. They laughed and shared stories, creating a bubble of warmth amid the chill of the night. But as the hours wore on, the reality of their situation crept back in. They were still fugitives on the run, and every moment spent in the open was a risk. Eventually, they reached a point where the river widened, its waters flowing more gently. The moonlight shimmered on the surface, illuminating the path ahead. "We should find a place to rest," he suggested, glancing at her. "We'll need to regain our strength for tomorrow." "Agreed," she replied, her eyes scanning the area for a suitable spot. "Let's look for a thicket or some brush that can hide us from view." After a short search, they found a dense cluster of bushes bordering the riverbank. It provided a natural shelter, concealing them from sight while still allowing them to hear the soothing sounds of the water. They settled in, laying the blankets they had brought on the ground. As they nestled close together for warmth, he could feel her heartbeat against his side, a steady reminder that they were in this together. "Whatever happens, we face it together," he whispered, looking into her eyes. "Together," she echoed, a reassuring smile spreading across her face. As they drifted off to sleep, the gentle sound of the river lulled them into a peaceful slumber, a brief respite from the uncertainties that lay ahead. In their dreams, they found solace, a world free from the shackles of their past, filled with the promise of hope and a future yet to be written. They awoke with the dawn, the first light of morning filtering through the leaves and casting a soft glow on their faces. He blinked against the brightness, the events of the previous night rushing back to him in a tidal wave of emotion. They had made it through the night, but the day ahead loomed large, fraught with challenges they had yet to face. "Good morning," he said, stretching his arms above his head and taking a moment to shake off the remnants of sleep. "Good morning," she replied, her voice still heavy with slumber. "How did you sleep?" "Not as well as I would have liked," he admitted, "but I feel ready for whatever today brings. We need to keep moving." "Yes," she agreed, her eyes brightening as she gathered her things. "We can't linger here. The longer we stay in one place, the more likely we are to be discovered." As they packed their belongings, he felt a surge of determination. They had come too far to turn back now. The thought of a future unbound by the plantation's oppressive grip propelled him forward. "Let's stick to the riverbank for now," he suggested as they set out again. "It will lead us toward the mountains, and we can always veer into the woods if we need to." They walked in silence, the sound of the river their constant companion. The morning air was crisp, invigorating their spirits as they ventured further from the only home they had ever known. As they walked, they encountered a small clearing with vibrant wildflowers swaying gently in the breeze. He paused, captivated by their beauty. "Look at those," he said, pointing to the colorful blooms. "It's amazing how life can be so resilient, even in the wild." She knelt down to touch the petals, a smile breaking across her face. "They're beautiful, just like the freedom we're seeking." "Exactly," he replied, feeling a swell of hope. "If we can find beauty in this world, there's no limit to what we can achieve." But as they admired the flowers, a sudden rustle in the bushes nearby sent a jolt of fear through them. They froze, their hearts racing as they exchanged worried glances. "Did you hear that?" she whispered, her voice tense. "I did," he replied, straining to listen. The rustling grew louder, and he instinctively stepped closer to her, his protective instincts kicking in. Then, from the underbrush, a deer emerged, its large eyes wide with curiosity. They both let out a breath they hadn't realized they were holding, laughter bubbling up in relief. "Just a deer," he said, chuckling nervously. "Just a deer, but it scared me half to death," she replied, her voice shaking with laughter. "I thought it was something much worse." "Let's keep moving," he said, glancing back toward the direction of the plantation. "We can't afford to let our guard down." With renewed determination, they continued along the riverbank, the deer watching them disappear into the thicket. The morning wore on, and as the sun rose higher in the sky, they found themselves more invigorated, bolstered by the promise of freedom that lay ahead. Yet the reality of their situation weighed heavily on them. They were still fugitives, and with each step, they were acutely aware of the danger that lingered in the shadows. But they were also dreamers, fueled by the hope of a life beyond the confines of their past. As they approached a bend in the river, the landscape began to change, the terrain becoming more rugged. The mountains loomed in the distance, a majestic reminder of both the obstacles and the freedom that awaited them. "Look," she said, pointing toward the peaks that pierced the sky. "We're getting closer." A sense of exhilaration coursed through him as he looked up at the mountains. "Yes, we are. We just have to stay focused and keep moving." With that, they pressed on, the promise of adventure and freedom driving them forward into the unknown. The sun hung high in the sky, casting a warm glow over the landscape as they continued their journey along the riverbank. The gentle sound of flowing water accompanied them, a soothing reminder of the freedom they sought. The mountains loomed closer now, their majestic peaks shrouded in mist, promising both beauty and peril. "Do you think we'll make it over the mountains?" she asked, breaking the silence that had settled between them as they walked. He glanced at her, taking in the determination etched on her face. "I believe we can. The mountains are a challenge, but they also offer shelter and cover. We just have to stay cautious." The thought of the mountains stirred something deep within him, a mix of excitement and fear. They were a barrier, yes, but also a gateway to a new life. He couldn't shake the feeling that crossing them would be a significant turning point in their journey. As they walked, the terrain began to change, becoming more uneven. The river, once wide and inviting, narrowed into a series of rocky outcrops, the water rushing over stones with a louder gurgle. He could see that they would soon need to cross to the other side, where the path appeared less obstructed by boulders and fallen trees. "Look," he said, pointing to a large rock formation that jutted out into the river. "We can use that to cross." She studied the water, her brow furrowing. "It looks slippery. Are you sure it's safe?" "Nothing ventured, nothing gained," he replied, trying to sound more confident than he felt. "We'll take it slow and steady. Just follow my lead." With a determined nod, they approached the rocky outcrop. The water flowed swiftly around it, the current strong enough to remind them of the danger that came with crossing. He stepped carefully onto the first rock, testing its stability before turning to offer her his hand. "Step where I step," he instructed, watching her closely. She took a deep breath and placed her foot on the first rock, her balance wavering momentarily. He reached out, steadying her. "You've got this. Just focus on the next step." One by one, they hopped from stone to stone, the water splashing around their legs as they navigated the crossing. It was more challenging than he had anticipated. The rocks were slick with algae, and the rushing water created an unsettling sense of urgency. "Keep your eyes on me," he called back to her as they reached the halfway point. "We're almost there." Just then, she stumbled, her foot slipping on a wet stone. Time seemed to slow as he lunged forward, grabbing her wrist just before she lost her balance completely. "I've got you," he shouted, pulling her back to safety. Heart racing, she looked up at him, fear and gratitude mingling in her gaze. "Thank you," she breathed, her voice shaky but determined. "I didn't mean to." "Don't worry about it," he interrupted, forcing a smile to ease her tension. "Just focus on getting across." With renewed caution, they continued their crossing. Finally, they reached the last stone, and he leaped onto the bank with a triumphant grin. She followed closely behind, her eyes wide with a mixture of relief and exhilaration. "See, we did it," he exclaimed, his heart swelling with pride. "Barely," she laughed, brushing the water from her clothes, "but we made it." They stood for a moment, catching their breath and allowing the thrill of the crossing to wash over them. The mountains loomed ahead, their peaks now visible against the clear blue sky. It felt like a new chapter was unfolding before them, and he could sense the weight of it in the air. "Now, we need to find a way up," he said, his gaze sweeping over the rugged terrain. "There should be a trail somewhere along the base of the mountains." As they began to trek toward the mountain foothills, the landscape transformed. The trees grew taller, their trunks gnarled and twisted, forming a natural barrier that felt both protective and intimidating. The air was cooler here, filled with the earthy scent of pine and damp moss. "Do you think anyone else has made this crossing?" she asked, glancing back at the river which sparkled in the distance. "Maybe," he replied, contemplating the stories of other escapees. "But many don't get this far. We have to be smart. We can't assume we're the only ones out here." With each step, the sense of adventure bubbled within him, tempered by the seriousness of their situation. There were risks ahead, but there was also hope, a flicker of possibility that ignited a fire in his heart. After climbing for what felt like hours, they reached a small clearing where the trees parted to reveal a breathtaking view of the valley below. The river snaked through the landscape, glimmering like a silver ribbon in the sunlight. "Wow," she breathed, stepping forward to take it all in. "It's beautiful." "It is," he agreed, his heart swelling at the sight. "But we can't linger here. We need to find shelter for the night before the sun sets." "Right," she replied, reluctantly tearing her gaze away from the view. "Do you think we'll find a cave or something?" "Possibly. There are bound to be places where we can hide from the elements and any prying eyes," he said, scanning the area. "Let's keep moving." They pressed on, the terrain becoming increasingly rocky and steep. As they climbed, they encountered a few small wildlife, squirrels scurrying up trees and birds flitting overhead. He felt a sense of camaraderie with the creatures of the forest, all navigating their own struggles for survival. But as the sun dipped lower in the sky, casting long shadows across the ground, a sense of urgency began to creep back in. They needed to find a safe place to rest before nightfall, and the thought of being exposed in the open filled him with unease. After several more minutes of climbing, they came across a small cave nestled within a rocky outcrop. The entrance was partially concealed by overgrown vines and bushes, providing a perfect hiding spot. "This looks promising," he said, motioning for her to join him. As they stepped inside, the cool air enveloped them, a welcome relief from the warmth of the day. The cave was spacious enough for them to sit comfortably, and the walls were lined with damp earth and stone. "Let's set up here for the night," he suggested, pulling out their meager supplies. "We can keep watch while we rest." She nodded, her exhaustion evident in her features. "I'll take the first watch," she offered. "No, we'll split it. You need to rest," he insisted, concerned for her well-being. "We both need to be alert tomorrow." "Fine," she relented, though her eyes betrayed her fatigue. "But let's get some food in us first." They shared a small meal of dried meat and fruit, their spirits lifted by the simple act of sustenance. As they ate, they began to discuss their plans for the following day. "We should head further into the mountains," he said, his brow furrowing in thought. "If we can get higher up, we'll have a better chance of finding a safe path through." "And what about water?" she asked, her concern evident. "We can't forget to refill our canteens. We'll need to stay hydrated." "Good point," he replied. "There should be streams higher up. We'll keep an eye out for them as we climb." After their meal, they settled into the cave, its coolness wrapping around them like a protective blanket. As the sun disappeared behind the mountains, the world outside darkened, and the sounds of the forest shifted. The chirping of crickets filled the air, punctuated by the occasional rustle of leaves. "I'll take the first watch," he said, positioning himself near the entrance of the cave, where he could keep an eye on their surroundings. "Wake me if you need me," she replied, settling down on the ground with her back against the cool stone. As she closed her eyes, he felt a surge of protectiveness wash over him. They had come so far, and the thought of losing her now was unbearable. He took a deep breath, focusing on the night's sounds, his senses heightened as he listened for any sign of danger. Time passed slowly as he sat in silence, his mind racing with thoughts of their journey. He replayed the events of the past few days, the crossing of the river, their shared laughter, and the overwhelming sense of freedom that now lay before them. But he also couldn't shake the feeling of unease that settled in his stomach. Every rustle of leaves, every distant sound made his heart race. Were they truly safe here? Would they be discovered? As the night deepened, he glanced back at her, finding comfort in the sight of her peaceful face. She had fought so hard to escape, and he was determined to ensure that her sacrifice was not in vain. They would find a way to freedom, together, no matter what it took. Suddenly, a distant sound broke the tranquility of the night, a low rumble like thunder or the growl of a predator. He tensed, straining to listen more closely. The sound grew louder, accompanied by the faint crunching of leaves. His heart raced as he shook her gently. "Wake up," he urged, urgency lacing his voice. "I think someone is coming." She stirred, her eyes fluttering open. "What? What is it?" "Shh," he whispered, holding a finger to his lips. "Listen." They both fell silent, listening intently. The noise continued, closer now, and he could make out the sound of footsteps crunching on the forest floor. It was unmistakable. Someone or something was approaching. "Do you think it's them?" she whispered, fear creeping into her voice. "I don't know," he replied, his mind racing. "We need to be quiet and stay hidden." They pressed themselves against the back wall of the cave, shadows enveloping them as they held their breath. The footsteps grew louder, and he could see a flicker of light through the trees. A lantern, swaying gently as its bearer moved closer. "Who could it be?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Maybe it's a search party," he replied, trying to keep the panic from his voice. "We need to stay still." The light drew nearer, illuminating the entrance of the cave. He held his breath, praying they wouldn't be discovered. The footsteps stopped just outside, and for a moment, all was silent. "Did you hear that?" a voice called out, low and cautious. "Yeah," another voice replied, sounding more confident. "They've got to be around here somewhere. Let's check the caves." His heart raced as he exchanged a worried glance with her. They were trapped, with no way to escape without being seen. "Stay down," he whispered, urging her to lower herself further into the shadows. The rustling of leaves grew louder as two figures stepped into the light, lanterns illuminating their faces. They wore the garb of plantation overseers, their expressions hardened and determined. "Search every nook and cranny," one of the overseers commanded. "They can't have gone far. If we find them, we'll make an example of them." The words sent a chill down his spine. He squeezed her hand tightly, knowing they had to remain silent and still. The overseers moved closer, their lanterns casting eerie shadows on the cave walls. "Check behind that rock," one of them ordered, pointing toward the very spot where they were hiding. The other man approached, peering into the cave with a sneer. "They think they can just run away. We'll show them what happens when they try to escape." He could feel her trembling beside him, her fear palpable. He squeezed her hand tighter, trying to convey strength through their connection. "Nothing here," the second overseer said, stepping back. "Let's check the next one. They can't have gone far." As they retreated, the weight of their danger hung heavily in the air. He let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. "Are they gone?" she whispered, her voice trembling. "Looks like it," he replied, still watching the entrance warily. "But we can't stay here. They could come back any minute." They waited a few moments longer, listening for any sign of the overseers returning. When the coast seemed clear, he turned to her, determination etched on his face. "We need to move now. There's no time to waste." Together they slipped out of the cave and into the cover of the trees, hearts pounding in their chests. The night felt alive with danger, but they were fueled by the adrenaline of their close call. "Where do we go now?" she asked, her voice low and urgent. "Up," he replied, pointing toward the mountain path. "We need to get higher. It'll be harder for them to find us if we're above them." With no time to spare, they began climbing again, navigating the rocky terrain with a renewed sense of urgency. The forest felt different now, the shadows deeper and more foreboding. Every crack of a twig made them jump, but they pressed on, driven by the need to put as much distance between themselves and the overseers as possible. As they ascended, the sounds of the forest enveloped them once more, the rustle of leaves, the distant call of an owl, and the wind whispering through the branches. But beneath those familiar sounds lay the tension of their recent encounter, a reminder of how close they had come to being caught. Hours passed as they climbed, the moon guiding their path. The higher they went, the cooler the air became, and the scent of pine filled their lungs. They paused occasionally to catch their breath, stealing glances at the stars that twinkled above them, each one a reminder of hope and freedom. Finally, as the first light of dawn began to break over the horizon, they reached a ledge that provided a stunning view of the valley below. The colors of the sunrise painted the sky in shades of orange and pink, a breathtaking sight that momentarily took their breath away. "Look at that," she said, her voice filled with wonder. "It's beautiful." "It is," he agreed, feeling a sense of peace wash over him. "But we can't lose sight of our goal. We need to keep moving." She nodded, her eyes still fixed on the horizon. "I know. It's just hard not to be distracted by all of this." He understood her sentiment. In that moment, surrounded by such beauty, it was easy to forget the dangers that lurked behind them. But they had come too far to let their guard down now. "Let's find a safe spot to rest for a bit," he suggested. "We need to gather our strength before we tackle the next part of our journey." They descended a short distance, finding a sheltered area among the trees where they could sit without fear of being seen. As they settled down, he pulled out their remaining supplies, sharing the last of the dried meat and fruit. "Tomorrow we'll need to look for food," he said, chewing thoughtfully. "Once we reach the next valley, we can see if there are any signs of life, perhaps a village or a farm." "Do you think we could find help?" she asked, her eyes wide with hope. "Possibly," he replied, though he remained cautious. "But we have to be careful. Not everyone will be friendly to strangers, especially ones like us." They finished their meal, the sun rising higher in the sky, casting a warm glow over the landscape. As they sat together, he felt a sense of camaraderie growing between them, forged in the shared experience of their flight. "Whatever happens, we'll face it together," he said, meeting her gaze. "Together," she echoed, her smile brightening the morning. With a renewed sense of purpose, they prepared to continue their journey. The mountains towered above them, a daunting yet inviting challenge. They had come this far, and there was no turning back now. As they set out once more, the sun fully rising behind them, they felt the weight of hope on their shoulders. They were no longer bound by the past. They were forging their own path into the unknown, together. The sun rose steadily, casting a golden hue over the landscape as they ventured deeper into the mountains. Each step felt like a defiance of fate, a challenge to the world that had sought to confine them. The air was crisp and invigorating, filling their lungs with a sense of possibility, while the distant call of a hawk echoed through the valleys, a reminder of their freedom. "Do you think we're getting close to the next valley?" she asked, glancing up at him as they climbed a steep incline. Her brow was furrowed, a mix of determination and fatigue evident on her face. "Should be just over this ridge," he replied, wiping the sweat from his brow. "We'll take it slow. The last thing we need is to rush and risk another fall." As they crested the ridge, he paused to take in the view. Below them lay a sprawling valley, dotted with patches of green and brown, a patchwork of fields and forests that extended as far as the eye could see. The sight filled him with a renewed sense of hope. "Look at that," he said, gesturing toward the valley. "If we can make it down there, we might find food, water, and maybe even a place to rest." She stepped beside him, her eyes wide with wonder. "It's beautiful. I can't believe we're finally free to explore places like this." "Let's keep that freedom," he said, his voice firm. "No more looking back. We have to stay focused on what lies ahead." They began their descent, carefully navigating the rocky terrain. The path was steep, and every step had to be measured to avoid slipping. As they descended, the sounds of the forest enveloped them, the rustling of leaves, the chirping of birds, and the distant babble of a stream flowing, somewhere below. "Do you think anyone else is out here?" she asked after a while, her gaze sweeping the valley. "It's possible," he replied, "but we have to be cautious. If there are other people, they might not be friendly." The thought lingered in the air, a reminder of the risks they faced. They had escaped the plantation, but the world beyond was vast and unknown, filled with dangers that could be just as threatening. As they reached the bottom of the slope, they spotted a narrow path winding through the trees. The trail appeared well-trodden, suggesting it was used frequently, either by wildlife or other travelers. He hesitated for a moment, considering their options. "Should we follow the path?" she asked, her voice breaking through his thoughts. "It might lead us to water or food," he replied, weighing the risks. "But we need to be careful. Stay close to me and keep your eyes open for anything unusual." With a nod, they stepped onto the path, the sun filtering through the leaves above, casting dappled shadows on the ground. The air was filled with the earthy scent of moss and pine, a refreshing change from the oppressive atmosphere of the plantation. As they walked, the path wound deeper into the woods, the trees growing denser around them. They exchanged quiet conversation, sharing snippets of their lives before the escape, moments that seemed so distant now, yet were woven into the fabric of who they were. "I used to dream of traveling," she said, her voice tinged with nostalgia. I always imagined seeing mountains and rivers like this, but I never thought I would actually do it." "Me too," he replied, a smile creeping onto his face. "I always dreamed of adventure, of exploring new places. I just never thought it would come with so much danger." "Yeah, there's that," she said, chuckling softly. "But at least we're together, right?" "Absolutely," he agreed, feeling a warmth spread through him. "We make a good team." The path continued to lead them through the forest, the sounds of the stream growing louder as they approached. After a short while they emerged into a small clearing where a crystal-clear stream flowed over smooth stones, its water sparkling in the sunlight. "Finally!" she exclaimed, her eyes lighting up at the sight. "Water!" They rushed to the bank, kneeling beside the stream. He cupped his hands and scooped up water, bringing it to his lips. The coolness was refreshing, invigorating, as it revitalized him after the long climb. "Drink up," he said, passing the water to her. She took a long drink, and he watched as relief washed over her face. "Thank goodness," she said, setting the water down. "I was starting to feel dehydrated. We should fill our canteens while we're here." "Good idea," he replied, pulling out their canteens and filling them with the cool, clear water. As they rested by the stream, he felt a sense of peace settle over them. The sound of the water was soothing, a gentle reminder of the natural beauty that surrounded them. For a brief moment they allowed themselves to relax, letting the tension of their escape fade away. "Do you think we should look for food?" she asked after a moment, her voice breaking the tranquil atmosphere. "I'm getting hungry." "Definitely," he replied, glancing around the clearing. "There might be berries or something nearby." They began to search the area, keeping an eye out for any signs of edible plants. He spotted some bushes laden with small dark berries and beckoned her over. "Look at these," he said, pointing to the bush. "I think they're safe to eat." She approached cautiously, examining the berries. "They look familiar. Are you sure they're not poisonous?" "I'm not entirely certain, but I think they're wild blueberries," he replied, plucking one and taking a small bite. The sweetness burst in his mouth, confirming his suspicion. "See? They're good." With that, she eagerly joined him in picking the berries, laughter bubbling between them as they filled their hands with the small fruits. They ate until their stomachs felt full, the sweetness invigorating them and providing the energy they needed for the journey ahead. "Thank you for finding these," she said, smiling at him. "I was starting to worry we wouldn't find anything." "Just another adventure," he replied with a wink. "We'll be just fine as long as we stick together." After their impromptu feast, they filled their canteens one last time, ensuring they had enough water for the next leg of their journey. With their spirits lifted and their energy renewed, they set off again, following the stream as it wound deeper into the valley. As they walked, the terrain began to change once more, becoming more rugged and hilly. The trees grew thicker, their trunks towering high above them, creating a canopy that filtered the sunlight into soft beams. The sounds of the forest surrounded them, birds chirping, leaves rustling in the wind, and the distant sound of rushing water. "Do you think we'll find a village or something soon?" she asked, glancing around. "Hopefully," he replied, scanning the landscape. "If we keep following the stream, it should lead us to somewhere more populated. I can't imagine there aren't other people living around here." After a while, they reached a fork in the stream. One path continued straight ahead, while the other veered off to the left, disappearing into a thicket of trees. "Which way should we go?" she asked, looking between the two options. "Let's take the left path," he suggested. "It looks like it opens up further down. We might find a better place to rest or even some signs of civilization." "Sounds good to me," she agreed, falling into step beside him. As they followed the left path, the sound of rushing water grew louder, filling the air with a soothing melody. The trees began to thin out, revealing glimpses of sunlight breaking through the branches, and the ground became softer beneath their feet. Soon they emerged into another clearing, this one larger than the last. Before them lay a wide expanse of grass, dotted with wildflowers swaying gently in the breeze, In the center, a small waterfall cascaded down a rocky ledge, feeding the stream they had been following. "Wow," she breathed, taking in the beauty of the scene. "This is incredible." He smiled, feeling a sense of pride at having led them here. "It really is. Let's take a moment to appreciate it." They walked closer to the waterfall, the mist from the water cooling their skin as they stood in awe of the natural beauty surrounding them. The sunlight glittered on the water, creating a rainbow in the spray. "Can you imagine living somewhere like this?" she asked, her eyes sparkling. "Just waking up to the sound of water and the smell of flowers?" "It sounds perfect," he replied, imagining a life far removed from the struggles they had faced. "But we have to stay focused on our reality. We can't forget what we're running from." "Right," she said, the seriousness of their situation creeping back in. "But maybe, once we get through this, we can find a place like this. A real home." He nodded, inspired by her optimism. "I believe we can. But first, we need to keep moving. Let's see what's on the other side of this clearing." With renewed determination, they continued on, crossing the grassy area and moving toward the sound of the waterfall. As they approached, he noticed a small path winding up the side of the rock formation, leading to the top of the waterfall. "Should we check it out?" he asked, pointing to the path. "Definitely," she replied, her excitement palpable. They carefully climbed the rocky path, the sound of the waterfall growing louder with each step. As they reached the top, the view opened up before them, an expansive vista of the valley below, stretching as far as the eye could see. "Look at that!" she exclaimed, her voice filled with wonder. "It's breathtaking." "It really is," he said, taking a moment to soak in the beauty. "This is exactly what we were hoping for. A chance to start anew." But as they stood there, a sudden rustle in the bushes nearby pulled their attention away from the view. He turned, instinctively positioning himself between her and the noise. "Did you hear that?" he asked, his heart racing. "Yeah," she whispered, her eyes wide with fear. "What do you think it is?" "I don't know, but we need to be ready for anything," he replied, scanning the area for any sign of danger. A moment later, a figure emerged from the underbrush. A tall man, dressed in rugged clothing, his face weathered and sunburned. He carried a bow slung over his shoulder, a quiver of arrows at his hip. "Who goes there?" the man called, his voice low and cautious. "Wait," he shouted, raising his hands in a gesture of peace. "We mean no harm." The stranger stepped closer, his eyes narrowing as he assessed them. "What are you doing out here? This is no place for the likes of you." "We're just passing through," he explained, glancing at her to gauge her reaction. "We're trying to find a safe place to rest." The man regarded them for a moment, then lowered his bow slightly. "You're not from around here, are you?" "No, we escaped from a plantation," he admitted, feeling a rush of vulnerability. "We're looking for freedom." The stranger's expression softened, and he lowered his bow completely. "I understand. There are others like you out here, but this is dangerous territory. You need to be careful. There are those who would turn you in for a reward." "Thank you for the warning," he replied, relief flooding through him. "We'll be cautious." "Follow me," the man said, gesturing for them to follow him down the path. "I know a place where you can rest, but you'll need to keep your voices down. There are eyes and ears everywhere." They exchanged a glance, a mix of cautious hope lighting up her face. "We'll follow you," she said, stepping closer to him. As they descended the path, he felt a sense of trepidation mixed with excitement. They had taken a significant step into the unknown, but perhaps this stranger could lead them to safety, a chance for a new beginning. With every step, they moved further away from the life they had known and closer to the possibility of freedom. The forest opened up around them, revealing a hidden world filled with secrets just waiting to be uncovered.